those who are watching online, and whoa. How's that? It's pretty loud. Yeah, maybe they can turn it down a little. I don't know. Janet, is anyone watching at home? Does this sound really loud to you? Yeah, it's annoying. Yeah. Yeah, maybe we could ask them to turn this down. Janice? Yeah, it's... Oh. It sounds really loud. Is it just me? No, it's loud. Yeah. Sounds good. It's the perfect volume to affect everyone differently. But it is annoying. Because I'm getting an echo. Let me put it down there. It's still annoying. All right. If you're watching at home, text me. So I know that if there's anyone watching. 239-220-8890. 239-220-8890. So text me if you're watching at home. Otherwise, we're not going to use this. Test. Perfect. Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Luis. Appreciate it. Okay, so today, well, actually, I once got a tour of that Jewish agency building. And usually the person who's the head of the Jewish agency, it's a big deal. And now I'm forgetting who's in charge of it right now. But the last president was Bougie Herzog, who's now the president of Israel. And before him was Natan Sharansky. It's a major position in Israel. So the last time I was there, in that building, it was a few years, it might have been like right after COVID. And we got a tour of the building with Herzog, who was in just a few weeks about to become president. And he said to us, normally I would never meet with you. But because Jacob Solomon called and asked that I meet with you, I'm meeting with you. Which is not the most endearing way to begin a meeting. He said, no, but he did it in his Israeli way. So it's, so I was actually, the whole trip, I don't know if you remember, but during COVID, there was like a mini conflagration with Hamas. And a few people were killed, and they sent a lot of bombs, and Israel attacked Gaza. And there was like a little mini war. And so I organized a group of rabbis from Miami to go to Israel on a solidarity mission. So about 15 of us went, and this was part of the trip. Herzog was about to become president. He had already been named president. In a few more weeks, he was about to be president. So he was really busy, and he said, normally, there's a lot going on. Normally, I wouldn't waste time meeting with you, but because Jacob Solomon's a good friend, I'm willing to, So, okay. So because I was in charge of the group, one of my responsibilities was each place we went, I picked one of the rabbis to introduce the speaker. So I picked a rabbi, Rabbi Litwack from Temple Sinai, and he kept trying, I gave him the bio of Herzog, and he kept trying to introduce him. And every time he'd read a line, Herzog would interrupt him. And he'd be reading his bio, and he'd say, does everyone have water? He used to read another line, can we open that window? And Alan Litwack from Sinai is the greatest guy. He tried 4 or 5 times. And finally, a couple years later, Herzog was here in Miami. And I called the Federation and I asked them, can you let Rabbi Litwack introduce him? But I wasn't able to get it done. So we have a lot of jokes about that. If you see any of the rabbis in Miami and you ask them about Herzog, you say, you don't want to be the one to introduce him. So anyway, what was really cool was we got to see the main room where they used to meet. And this was where the provisional government of the Yishuv, you know what the Yishuv was? The Yishuv is basically what the Israeli government was before 1948, led by Ben Gurion. And we were in the room where they used to have their meetings. And we learned some interesting things. Now, this is where they had been meeting since, like the late 30s. And there's a tour guide there, and the tour guide comes, and before Herzog comes in, she's explaining to us, and she says, you're sitting in the room where Ben Gurion and his whole team learned about the Holocaust. This is the room where they found out for the first time, in the late 30s, early 40s, about the concentration camps and what was going on. And we were sitting in the same seats where they were, which was beyond belief, powerful. So then they said, the British used to come into that room all the time and search for secret files and recordings and all this stuff. So they never found them. And because the British wanted to know, where did the Zionists, where were they keeping their military and where were their hideouts and all this stuff. So the British used to raid the room when they were meeting and look for stuff. And the tour guide said, do you know where they hid the stuff so that they never found them? And she showed us there was a secret compartment behind a wall. And the British actually found it. But there was a big statue in the room of Herzl. And they just put the stuff under the statue of Herzl. It was a bust of his head. They just put it under the bust. And they hid it like in plain view right under the statue. The British never found it. So it's a really cool tour. If you're ever in that building, you can see some. They have all the pictures of the founders of Israel sitting there and creating the state, which is really incredible. That building's still there, and today it's the Jewish Agency. So the Jewish Agency controls about $400 million every 5 years from money that they raise, from dues that are paid by Zionist organizations, and from the vote that they have. Because in order to vote in the election, you have to pay $5 to vote. Now, the way it works is there are all these different Zionist organizations who are running in this election. We, the Reform Movement, are one of them. Okay? We're running together on the same platform with the Conservative Movement. So the Reform and Conservative are together. And in Israel, Reform and Conservative are really the same thing with regard to the rest of the country, how they're perceived by the government, what their rights are, what they can do, what they can't do, and so forth. And I'll get into that in a second. So you have the way it's run in the same way as a parliamentary system like they have in Israel. So, for example, if you wanted Netanyahu to be prime minister, you wouldn't vote for Netanyahu, you'd vote for Likud. Right? So you go in, you drop your little note that says Likud or whatever they have letters. I forget the name of they all have code letters. You pick Likud, you drop it in, Likud gets a vote. So let's say they get enough votes. Likud has a list based on so Likud will have primaries. Every party has primaries. So Netanyahu wins the primary, he goes number 1 on the list. The guy who comes in number 2, Yisrael Katz, for example, he gets the second most votes in the primary, he's number 2. And then number 3 and number 4. So let's say Likud gets a certain percentage of the vote. That will determine how many of the people on their list get into the government. So if they have 100 people on their list and they get, 40 votes, the top 40 people are now Knesset members. The next 60 get pushed off onto committees or local and regional councils and stuff, but they're not in the Knesset. Okay? So if you're number 40, you're in the Knesset. If you're number 41, you're out. And you're going to be in charge of, collecting stamps, in Metula, on the border of Lebanon or something. Who knows what they're going to send you to do. Now, if you're at the very top and you're number 1, you're going to be prime minister. If you're number 2, you're probably going to be defense minister or foreign minister or the finance minister, one of the big portfolios. But in Israel, you also need other parties to make a coalition. So, okay, I have 40 votes, but I need 61 to make a coalition, and I've got this guy over here, his party's got 20 votes. Well, what does he want? He wants 2 ministerial positions for his 2 top guys. So maybe he happens to be a military expert, and he says, I want to be the secretary of defense. Or what do they say in Israel? Defense minister. And if I don't get that, I'm not joining your government. If I don't join that government, you're not going to have a government, so you have to give it to me. Okay, that's how it works. So it's the same thing with these parties. So the Reform movement listed, some 600 people. Now, how does the Reform movement pick who are going to be the leaders on their slate? So the first one's Rick Jacobs, the president of the movement. And then you have the president of HUC. And so, but we have to go, we're Reform. So we have to go male, female, transgender, from Guatemala, every possible category. So let's take a look. We have a website. Our movement has a website. And let's see. Not easy to use. Can I write on here? No. Okay. Scroll down. Oh, so here's all the different people that are running. Right, you have Shas. I know it's hard to see, but you have lots of different Orthodox groups, Esha Torah, Eretz HaKodesh, and then lots of different Zionist groups like the ZOA. I think AIPAC. I don't know. AIPAC doesn't because there's something else. But hang on. So how do I get? This is really. Oh, here. Okay. So here's the Reform slate. I don't know if we can make it bigger. So you can see here, number 1 is Rick Jacobs. Number 2 is Angela Buckdahl, who's the rabbi of Central Synagogue in New York. Rabbi Hara Person is the president of the CCAR, which is the Reform Rabbis Union. And if you go down to, let's see.
There you are.
Tell me when you see it. All right. There's me. I'm number 50. So which is pretty good. It means I'm 25 men. But if it gets to 50, then on October 20th, I fly to Israel, vote, and come back on the 23rd. So I'll be there for about a day and a half just to vote. Why do I have to come right back? For a bar mitzvah. And I have a bar mitzvah on both sides of the weekend, so I can't spend a Shabbat there. So it's October 20th to the 23rd. But if you think about it, I'd be a delegate at the same Congress that Theodore Herzl started. Now, this is the third time I've been on the slate, and it's never gotten to me. But I'm usually like somewhere over here. So this time, for whatever reason, they put me over here. I don't know. I'm not sure how it works. It doesn't mean anything. I don't know. I don't understand it.
Who's the one that decides?
What's that? Oh. See this guy at the top? Him. Well, there's him, and then where's Josh Weinberg? I don't see Josh. Huh, where's Josh? It's weird. Well, there's another guy named Josh Weinberg. I guess maybe he's not allowed to be on here because he works for he probably can't be on here because he's employed by the organization. But he's a vice president of the URJ, the Reform Movement, but he's in charge of the Israel platform. He's in charge of ARTSA. He's a really good friend of mine. And they made the decision. They told me this year they were putting me higher up. So when I got the list, I thought I was going to be higher up. But like these people, they're not going. But I think in the past we've gotten over 100 votes. So I think, at 50, I'm sitting pretty good. And as much as I love going to Israel, to go for a day and a half isn't the most exciting. But to go to Israel to be part of the same conference that Herzl was, that's something. Now, what I wanted to talk about today is, first of all, a little bit about the purpose of this election, but also what is the state of Reform Judaism in Israel, and is there a future? Because we've been working at this for a long, long time, trying to fight for the rights of Reform Jews in Israel, and we really have not gotten that far. Now, what is it, when you think about Reform Judaism in Israel, or when you think about it in America, of people who actually care about being Jewish. People who don't care about being Jewish, they're not affiliated, forget them for now. But of people who care, you're either Orthodox or you're not. Now, you could call yourself, I'm Reform, I'm conservative, but what's really the difference? Okay, so maybe I do this mitzvah and you don't do that mitzvah, and I do this mitzvah and I like Musaf and you don't, and okay, whatever. But it's not like it used to be. We covered this, I think, in the last class. It's not like it used to be in the 1880s, where Reform was, a little bit like St. Michael's, and conservative was a little bit like Chabad, and now we sort of all look the same, and okay. But in Israel, it's different. In Israel, you have people who are completely Orthodox. I'd say maybe you have three kinds of people. Whereas in America, I would say you're either Orthodox or you're not. In Israel, there's three types of people. There's people who are ultra-Orthodox. Now, ultra-Orthodox means, and the difference between ultra-Orthodox and modern Orthodox is ultra-Orthodox means you're completely shut out of any part of the world that's not Jewish. You won't read a normal newspaper. Even in Israel, you won't read the normal newspapers. You wouldn't read Haaretz or Mariv or Yediot Achronot. You probably don't have a TV. Your phone is a kosher phone. This is not a kosher phone. This comes with shrimp in it. But you could get a kosher phone. So what's a kosher phone? You can't get on the internet. You can only text, people who know a certain amount of Torah. Yeah, there are things you can do, that, you don't have access to the outside world. You probably at home speak Yiddish, and you probably reject Hebrew. You may or may not even recognize the state of Israel. And you may pray for the destruction of the state of Israel because you don't think that God gave us the land yet and we don't deserve to be there, even though you live there, and you hate the army who protects you. If it wasn't for that army, you'd be slaughtered, but you hate them. Yeah. There's a joke in Israel that in Israel, 1/3 of the country goes to the army, 1/3 of the country pays taxes, and 1/3 of the country works. And it's all the same third. And that's ultra-Orthodox, completely shut out. I know a guy, a pretty well-known guy in Israel. His name is Menachem Bambach. He's ultra-Orthodox. He didn't speak Hebrew, lives in Israel. He didn't speak Hebrew until he was 13. He only Yiddish. Now he speaks beautiful, fluent Hebrew and English and Yiddish. He started a trade school for Haredim, for ultra-Orthodox people. And he's trying to get them in the workforce. They're still ultra-Orthodox. But it wouldn't kill them if they could change a tire, or be a typist, or do something to contribute to society instead of just being a drain on society. It's a fabulous idea. His own family won't even talk to him anymore. He's been ostracized from his own family because he's trying to connect the ultra-Orthodox world with reality. And so that's how hardcore they are. That's one type of Israeli. And it's a smaller number. You're talking maybe 15 to 20%. Yeah. Not Orthodox, ultra-Orthodox. There's plenty of other Orthodox, but that's ultra-Orthodox. Now, then there's the next step over, which is modern Orthodox. What's the difference in modern Orthodoxy? In terms of how they observe Judaism, it's the same. They keep kosher, they keep Shabbat, they go to the mikveh, all the same stuff. Their kids go to yeshiva, they learn Torah, but
Army? What about the army?
Some yes, some no. Mostly yes. But they're open to the outside world. So you could be very seriously Orthodox and be a dentist, or a lawyer, or a journalist, or a career army person. But you're Orthodox. And more we're seeing this. And actually October 7th changed Israel a lot. And especially in the army. It has become trendy in the army for the men to wear kippot. Soldiers that had no connection to Judaism, but the fervor for Judaism and the identity and the pride of being Jewish since October 7th has skyrocketed. And I asked this to when I was in Israel on my last trip, I asked the generals, have you seen more? And they said, like we've never seen in our careers, more Judaism in the army.
Isn't it fear?
Fear?
Fear-based?
No, I think it's pride. I think October's, at least according to them. But according to...
That's a nice way of interpreting it.
No, these young soldiers are not afraid of anything. These are the bravest soldiers in Israel's history. This has been... If you ask the generals, how have the Israeli army performed in Gaza and Lebanon since the war? The greatest they've ever seen. And they didn't expect it because they called this the TikTok generation. And they expected them, they thought they weren't a Zionist and all they cared about was themselves and their phones. And when the war started, they saw these are the best soldiers we've seen. These guys are amazing. Now, October 7th changed everybody. I mean, but they've performed unbelievably. I mean, unbelievable. Oh, is it scary to go into Gaza? Of course. But these soldiers were ready to go. They didn't want to be pulled out. They wanted to stay and finish the job.
It's not contradictory.
What's that? Okay, yeah, fair enough. But I don't think that's why they're wearing kippot. I think that is out of pride and maybe identity. And also how visceral and painful October 7th was. That changes you. Changed me. And I don't even live there. But I have cousins in the Army. I've heard a lot about it, but obviously I'm not an Army person. But now you have this other type of orthodoxy who don't really relate to the Haredim, are passionately Zionist, love the state of Israel, may not agree with the government, may want everything to be kosher, may not sit next to women on El Al flights or on the buses, but they love the state of Israel and they're passionately Zionist. And almost all of them grew out of the ideology of Rav Kook, who was the first chief rabbi of Palestine and really most notably famous for ordaining my great-grandfather in 1927. I think that's his claim to fame. It's a joke. Jesus. All right, so then there are the secular Israelis. And I always thought that the secular Israelis, who make up probably 65 to 70% of Israel, should identify with Reform and Conservative Judaism. Because if you looked at their practice, they don't do much. They probably, when they're outside of Israel, they don't keep kosher. Maybe when they're inside of Israel, they don't keep kosher. If they're young, better than average chance they have a tattoo. Tattoo are the rage in Israel now, which was horrifying in the early days of Israel, because tattoos reminded everyone of the Holocaust. But that's over. I remember when tattoo parlors started to open in the early 90s in Tel Aviv, and I said, ugh, I'm not in favor of tattoos, but now they're in Jerusalem, like near Ben Yehuda Street, tattoo parlors. And that is so foreign. You would never have expected that. Now and the irony is that they'll get like a Jewish star, which is like eating kosher shrimp. It's not a thing. But they'll have a verse from the Torah. And it's like, what? But that's where, so, what it means to be Jewish, it's changed a lot in certain ways. But they'll get a tattoo of how proud they are to be Jewish by doing something that's forbidden in the Torah. That's secular Judaism. Now, why would they do that? Because well, let me get back to the original question, and I'll get back to why they do that. I always thought that what this is about convincing secular Jews in Israel that they are Reform and conservative. And only in the last couple of weeks have I realized that thinking that I've been doing for the last 25 years is wrong. It's not working, and there's a reason why it's not working. So I want to explain the reason why it's not working. Before the state of Israel, now we know who Herzl is. Right? Were any of you there? Are any of you in my class at Beth Am University? I talked about this Wednesday night. Okay, so there's going to be a little bit of a repeat, but it's okay to hear it more than once. Don't think this class is free, so it's not like we're ripping you off with the same material. And we give cookies and soda. So, before the state of Israel was founded, and Herzl started to lead the charge in the late 1890s, Herzl was known as what we call a political Zionist. There were different variations of Zionism, even from before Herzl all the way through today. And the main distinctions of what the different types of Zionism are, there's religious Zionism, there was political Zionism, there was military Zionism, there was socialist Zionism, the kibbutz movement, and there was cultural Zionism. Herzl, in 1903, walked into the Zionist Congress, the same one that I'll be at, if we get to 50. So please vote for me. It'll cost you $5, but it's okay. Walks in and says, we have a real problem. The pogroms are out of control. We have no future in Europe. I mean, Herzl was a real prophet. I mean, to say we have no future in Europe in 1897, he was 100% right. He knew it was coming. Jabotinsky said the same thing. But we can't go to Israel yet. Or we can't go to Palestine yet because no one's helping us do it. The Turks won't let us in. And the British and the Americans are not in favor. Nobody's helping us. We can't go there yet, but we have to get out of here. So I have a plan. There's another place where they'll take us temporarily, Uganda. So we'll go to Uganda. So he walks into the Zionist Congress. First one is 1897, the sixth one in 1903. And guess what? He says to the delegates, this is my suggestion. We go to Uganda. By the way, had they gone to Uganda, they could have saved millions of Jews. Because most of the Jews who would have gone to Uganda were slaughtered in the Holocaust. He could have saved them. What do you think the delegates did? Do you think they voted for the Uganda plan, or voted against the Uganda plan? How many of you think against? Almost everyone. How many think for? How many don't care? No, all right. They voted for it. I forget the exact number, but it was like, I think 258 to 190 in favor of the Uganda plan because they agreed with him and said, there's no future here. They're slaughtering us. But we can't get in there yet. So let's go there and then we'll go there. Well, when they voted yes, the Eastern European and the Russian delegations walked out in protest. And they said, you're giving up on the dream. We're not. And Herzl couldn't believe it because the people who were suffering the worst, where the pogroms were the Russians and the Eastern Europeans. And they're the ones who walked out. And Herzl said, you're the ones who are in the worst shape. We over here in 1897, things weren't that bad in France and Germany. They weren't great. The anti-Semitism was crazy, but nothing compared to the pogroms. And they said to him, the whole point of Zionism is that it has to be Jewish. And if you take the Jewish out of it and you go to Uganda, you'll get stuck there and it'll never work. And Herzl gave up on the idea. One of the people who walked out was Jabotinsky, who I'm going to talk about Wednesday night. That's more military Zionism. But at the same time, there were some other Jews. You've probably heard the names. A couple of them who are extremely famous. Have you ever heard the name Asher Ginsburg? Now, he had a much more famous name, a pen name. What was his pen name? Asher Ginsburg? Echad Ha'am. Echad Ha'am had an idea already before Herzl. Herzl would have been, if you asked Herzl, what should be the language in Israel once we have a state? French or German. Because that's what high society, that's what cultural people speak. It should be French or German. In Israel, Hebrew is a dead language. And the Orthodox won't speak it anyway because it's the holy tongue. And you're not supposed to use Hebrew to talk about taxes or botany or food. Hebrew is only meant for talking Torah. So it's not going to work. Now, people like Echad Ha'am, and also very famous, Chaim Nachman Bialik, they grew up in the Orthodox world. They went to the best yeshiva in the world, the Volozhin Yeshiva, which is in today Belarus, the most famous yeshiva. Rabbi Chaim of Volozhin came out of there. The Soloveitchik dynasty came from there. The Netziv, these are like Hall of Fame rabbis. You've never heard of them, but they're so famous no one knows who they are. But in the Torah world, these are the biggest names. The Netziv. You can't understand the Torah without looking at these traditions. The Lithuanian, at the time it was Lithuanian, but the Lithuanian yeshivas were considered the most proficient. There were a lot of Jews in Lithuania. So they came out of this world with that knowledge, with that yeshiva, Torah, Talmud knowledge, but they started to move away from it because they were influenced by something called the Haskalah. The Haskalah is the Hebrew word for the Enlightenment. And what was going on already in the 1700s in France and Germany was that Christians were starting to say, you can come to logic, reason, and morality on your own. By human reasoning, we could figure out logic and morality. And this was the first time that anyone said we can figure out logic and morality without the Bible. And there was a very famous German rabbi who lived in the 1700s named Moses Mendelssohn. And Moses Mendelssohn was a socialite, came from a wealthy family, and he started to say to the Jews, listen, I don't think these words ever came out of his mouth, but he had this idea that we should live as Jews and look like Jews at home. But when we're out in the street, would it kill you to look like everyone else so that they stop hating us so much? Do we need to pay us? Do we need the big coats? You couldn't just buy a German jacket once in a while? And start to try to fit in and to assimilate. Even though he was Orthodox to the day he died. Although, of his 6 kids, 5 of them ended up leaving Judaism, and he only had 1 Jewish grandkid. And after that, there were no more Mendelssohns. So the Orthodox say, look what happens when you start... Okay, it's not the best argument, but that's what happened to Mendelssohn, which is kind of a shame. But Mendelssohn started to say to the Germans, you Germans have been focusing so much on the Bible that you haven't been focusing on German thinkers. And people liked him because he was like a German, non-Jews liked him because he was trying to give them pride in being German. The Jews loved Germany around the turn of the century. If you don't believe me, go to the Berlin cemetery and see how many Jews died for Germany in World War I. Thousands of them. And they were proud to fight for Germany because they were accepted there more than almost anywhere else. Jews were in the best universities. You know why they had to kick you know why the Nazis had to kick all the Jews out of the universities? Because the Jews were in the universities. In Russia, they didn't have to kick them out because they never let them in. But they were in. They were starting to do well. Right? The reason they burned all of the Jewish books is because there were Jewish books in their libraries. Right? If you ever go to Humboldt University in Germany, you can see the square where they burned all the books. It's terrible memories. So Moses Mendelssohn, once he convinced the Germans that they should have pride in being German, he said, wait a minute, I'm also Jewish. I need to get the Jews to have pride in being Jewish. He started focusing on that. But not just, but he was saying it in a different way. He was saying, just like they're over there trying to figure out how to be good people without the Torah or without their Bible, we Jews need to focus on our culture and our music and our art. And he tried to give Jews identity. Well, people like Achad Ha'am and Chaim Nachman Bialik, who came out of yeshivas like Volozhin, said, look at Mendelssohn. I love being Jewish, but I don't want to sit here and talk about 6 hours, what happens if my ox falls into your pit? You know, in Bava Kama in the Talmud. I once spent 6 months studying the laws of oxen in the Talmud. If my ox falls in your pit or my ox get loose. After 6 months, I said, I don't even have an ox. How much ox law do I, never even owned an ox. But I know what to do if my ox, runs into your backyard. I've used that line before with better success, but it doesn't matter. Okay. I'm through now what I hoped would be the introduction in the first 10 minutes. It took 45. So, people like Achad Ha'am and Chaim Nachman Bialik went to people like Herzl and said, you're trying to build a state for political reasons and through political methods, which means that you see that this isn't working out for the Jews here, so you want to put the Jews there. But when you put the Jews there, all the street signs are going to be in German. And there's not going to be anything Jewish about the state. It's just going to be a safe place. And Achad Ha'am and Chaim Nachman Bialik said, and people like Eliezer ben Yehuda, if you don't have Hebrew, if you don't have Jewish culture, baked into normal society, then it's not worth doing. And they won the day. And the cultural Zionists merged in with Herzl. Herzl agreed with them. And they all merged together. And so Hebrew started to rise. And they started to reinvigorate it. And they said, okay, when we have a state, the weekend is going to be Friday, Saturday. Because Shabbat has to be the center of the weekend. And we're not going to have school on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And you're not going to be allowed to, break Shabbat in public in certain ways. And, we're going to have a symphony that plays Jewish music. And we're going to have museums that talk about Jewish history. And they built a state with a Jewish character. So when you go to the train station on Hanukkah, there are sufganiyot there. One of the things that we hate as American Jews, and maybe you don't, but in general, is like you go to the courthouse and there's a Christmas tree. And, maybe there's a Christmas tree the size of the one they have at Rockefeller Center, and then there's a menorah that's this big. And we go crazy, and it's not fair, and it's terrible. But when you're in Israel, and you see Hanukkah stuff all over the place, this is great. That's why I don't complain about the stuff here. People say, there's a Christmas tree at the mall. Yeah, it's because 99% of people here are Christian. You want to live in a Jewish world? You can. Move to Israel. You can have all the Hanukkah stuff you want. But this isn't a Jewish country. Now, we want to be respected here. They should put a menorah up, especially in areas where, if there's no menorah in Tulsa, there's some Jews in Tulsa, but pick a city where my wife's from, Salina, Ohio, there's not one Jew. You're not going to find a menorah. Nobody there even knows what it is. If they put it up, they would think it's Christian, and they wouldn't even know. Okay.
You know what? I was born in Israel. Nothing.
Really?
Nothing.
It's hard to believe. Achad Ha'am would have been very upset with that.
There was no religion. There was just no celebration.
Wow. That's hard to believe. But if you think about Israelis, though, I don't know what your family did, but I'll give you an example of my family. My family in Israel is very secular. They don't even go to shul on Yom Kippur. They'll look down on me for being Reform. But on Yom Kippur, they'll be at the beach eating cheeseburgers. And then they'll say, ugh. But why do they do that? Because here's the main crux of it. Israelis are born with more Judaism automatically. They don't have Halloween, they have Purim. Purim's when everyone dresses up. And I know they had the Ad Delo Yeda parades even before 1948. I've seen videos of them, in black and white. Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, there's no school, right? On Yom HaShoah, they play sad music. On Yom HaZikaron, they play sad music. The Judaism's baked into the country. And you don't have to really do anything to have that Jewish identity. You get it automatically. I don't know, they don't do it so much anymore, but they used to learn Tanakh. They used to learn Hebrew Bible stories in school. So the average Israeli kid, if you ask them, who's Samson? What happened at Masada? They know it. You ask our kids, not as much. As much as I try to force feed it to them. The kids who are in my class do well, but, the other teachers. Yeah. No, we have good teachers. But I mean kids in other cities in America. Ugh.
It's not the teacher.
No, it's not the teacher. It's not here. Not here. It's the system. But think about this. So if you're a secular Israeli, that's what you have. So I was going to say, my cousins, they don't hardly do anything Jewish traditionally, but when I go for their dinner on Friday night, they put their yarmulkes on, they take out a siddur, and they do the kiddush. And they light the candles, and they have the motzi. Even though they're the most secular people in Israel. It's just a little bit a part of... Now, here's the difference. When Reform Judaism came to America, and we're going all the way back to the 18th century, and really now into the 1800s, the Reformers said, let's bring the stuff that's Jewish and highlight the stuff that that the Christians will like and that doesn't offend them. So, tikkun olam. Feeding the homeless, the widow, the orphan. They love that stuff. Hey, that's in our Torah. Let's highlight that stuff. Keep kosher, forget it. Shabbat, forget it. Hebrew, forget it. Distinctive clothing, forget it. And you can't blame them. Because it's easy for us to say, what kind of Jews are you? But these are Jews who are coming from places where if you don't convert to Christianity, they burn you at the stake, or sell you into slavery, or kill you, right? Or you're taxed and you're living in ghettos. That's where they're coming from. So they come to America and they said, I can't believe this place. They don't hate us. We could live next door to them. We can have our synagogues. But let's not offend them. Let's try to fit in. And so now you have synagogues with organs. First one was in Hamburg, the Hamburg organ. But these ideas crystallized in Germany. They all got wiped out in the Holocaust, but it found a home here. And so now we have organs. You don't see them so much anymore, but if you go to one of the old Reformed synagogues from the 1800s, there's organs. Why? Because that's what the Christians were doing. The synagogue architecture. If you've ever been to a place like Charleston, the synagogue doesn't face the street because we don't want to impose. We don't want to draw any attention. So Israelis look at that and say, that's your Judaism. Your tradition is trying to be as Christian as you can, but still being Jewish. And our tradition is Judaism is baked into everything that we do. Now, what we have in common, both of us are not Orthodox. I'm talking about secular Israelis and Reform and conservative Jews in America. We're all not Orthodox. And so I always figured we're the same. But only now, after I really studied what cultural Zionism is and the kind of Judaism that they have baked in that we don't have, that's the reason they look at us and say, I know we do it the same, but we're made up differently than you. And so when we're in America, we'd rather go to Chabad. Because in the cultural Zionist system, the rabbi is still Orthodox. I'm not so Orthodox, but the rabbi still is. And your rabbi is pregnant. And my rabbi has 47 kids and a beard that goes down to the floor. I'm generalizing and stereotyping, and it's more just for effect. That's not exactly the truth. I'm a Reform rabbi. I'm not pregnant. But they look at that and say, what is this? And they're saying, what is this, while they're eating a cheeseburger with a tattoo that says, I love God. And so you're like, we're standing at them saying, what don't you get? You're us. And they're looking at us and saying, where's your Judaism? And we're talking past each other. And it's not working. So that's the problem. And meanwhile, we Reform Jews have been trying to get a foothold in Israel for a long time. And we have some 70 synagogues, and the conservatives have more, some 100, some synagogues all over Israel. They're very small. In Israel, there's a synagogue on every street. On every corner, there's a synagogue. So they don't have big synagogues like this. If we were in Israel, we'd be the biggest synagogue in Israel. Because you need a synagogue you can walk to. So there's synagogues every 10 feet. But the Reform and conservatives, even made up of Israelis, trying to sell their message to cultural Jews who are not Orthodox, those cultural Jews are saying, Look, I don't go to temple that much, but if I do go, I'm going to go to a real one. That's their thinking. And we're standing here screaming, what's not real about us? We actually have more in common with you than they do. And on the surface, we do. But inside, the Israeliness is really Jewish. So even if I don't wear tefillin, even if I don't daven, inside, I'm really, really Jewish. And you don't feel like that to me.
I think a lot of it also with the difference in the mental, in the sense of minority versus being a majority.
Uh-huh.
So when you're a majority,
It's easier.
it's everywhere. You breathe the air and do stuff.
But you know what's another difference? If I go to an Orthodox synagogue, it's accepted. If I get married there, it counts. If I convert there, it's real. And it's free. If I go to Reform, if I get married there, it doesn't really count. If I get converted there, I'm not considered Jewish. The whole country looks down on them because they don't think they're Jewish enough. And I have to pay to go there because the government doesn't fund them. And so I have to pay dues to go there. So when your choice is the free one that everyone accepts or the expensive one that nobody accepts, and by the way, everyone I know goes to that one. It makes it a little tougher. Now, in Tel Aviv, there is one Reform synagogue that's booming. There are a few that are booming. There are a few that are doing really, really well. Because in the areas where they are, there are people who get it and see that. And the one thing you can't forget is a lot of these secular Israelis have a real hatred of the Orthodox. Because the Orthodox look down on them and tell them they're not real Jews too. Because the way they dress, the way they think, the way they do, they don't keep Shabbat, they don't keep the holidays, they don't keep kosher to their standards, and the Orthodox. So there's a lot of hatred between the Orthodox and the secular. And so they look at them and say, well, you know, I could go to the Reform or I can go to the Orthodox, but I can't stand the Orthodox. I'm sick of them telling me this, that, or the other thing. So I'm going to go to the Reform. So there's some of that too. All of that is bad for Judaism. We need to respect each other, but that's what's happening. For sure. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, right. It's exactly what you said. That's how they're raised. I mean, people like to do how they're raised. And if you're raised being taught that Reform and conservative rabbis are not real rabbis, even if you're the most, irreligious person in the world, you're not going to step foot inside a Reform synagogue. I'll tell you, when I was in Charlotte, my first congregation, when I was in rabbinic school, I believed what they taught me. The Torah was written by, a few guys, 8 years ago, and, whatever. And so I was pretty liberal when I came out of school. I didn't wear a yarmulke, not even on the bima when I first started. Because I was in Charlotte. North Carolina is like classical Reform. It's pretty left-wing. So we wore taluses, but not yarmulkes. Because talus is commanded in the Torah. The yarmulke is just a custom. So we wore taluses. So I was having dinner one night with the head of Federation, who invited me to dinner in a non-kosher restaurant. I've always kept kosher. I've done that my whole life. But I was out to dinner in a non-kosher restaurant with Yossi Omer, who's the brother of Ehud Omer, who would become prime minister of Israel. So it's me, Yossi Omer, the brother of Ehud, former prime minister of Israel and former convict. He was arrested for fraud. And the head of Federation in Charlotte. And the guy had been to our services for Shabbat, and he says to me, how come you don't wear a yarmulke? So I said, it's just a custom. I said, but I wear a talis. He's like, it's not right. You shouldn't, it's not Jewish. A rabbi needs to wear a yarmulke. So he's lecturing me on this while he's eating like treif. Here I am eating a salad, because I can't eat the meat there. And he's eating, he's going to town on like ribs or something. And several years later, I realized he's right. Because what happened is the yarmulke has become a symbol of what it means to be Jewish. And if you're a man standing on a bima without a yarmulke and you're calling yourself a rabbi, my argument was right. It's just a custom. It's not in the Torah. And in the Talmud, it's very debatable whether you're supposed to wear it or not. There are certain places you weren't allowed to wear it because the pagans were wearing head coverings, and they said Jews can't do what the pagans are doing. It only became it's only in the Shulchan Aruch, it's only in the 16th century that they said you have to wear a yarmulke, the Jewish law. Meanwhile, the talis is from the Torah. So I was giving him a rational argument, but he was giving me the inside your kishkas argument, and he was right. And ever since then, I said, I'll never do something as I'm functioning as a rabbi without a yarmulke again. There's sometimes I don't wear a yarmulke. I stop wearing a yarmulke when I get my hair cut. It got annoying, I'm not so religious,
Well, what do the very religious do when they get a haircut?
I think it's for those. Look, I wouldn't do it, but they, So I want to end by showing you. There's so much more I wanted to get to, but we're out of time. But I want to just show you. We have a commercial for our slate, the Reform and Conservative movement, for our to vote for us. And the Orthodox, one of the well-known Orthodox parties, also has a commercial. I want to show you both commercials. They're about a minute and a half. Well, there are a couple. The Orthodox one's a little bit longer, 3 or 4 minutes each. We'll end with this. But what you see in it is, for a lot of ways, I'm not okay with the Reform movement stance on Israel. I'm more to the right. I'm not going to sit and cry for certain things that the Reform movement's crying about when there's 76 hostages still need to be. I'm just a little more to the right, and I don't agree with a lot of them on that. So how can I sit there in the World Zionist Congress and sit with the Reform when I don't agree with them on their Zionist principles, and I don't necessarily think that the way they've conducted themselves since October 7th is appropriate? I don't agree with them. I don't go to the Reform movement for my Zionism. For my Zionism, I go to AIPAC, I go to AJC, I go to Magen David Adom, I go to Friends of the IDF, I go to Federation, I go to Hadassah, I go to Hatzalah. There's no shortage of places, JNF. I'm involved in all of those. There's no shortage of places I can find my Zionism. Reform movement's not my cup of tea, but on Zionism. But there are issues there that they're really fighting for that are extremely important. Can people I convert be citizens of Israel? I'm in favor of gay rights. And as the law, if they get their way, if there's a gay couple that's married and one of them gets injured fighting for Israel in war, the gay partner can't visit that person in the army, in the hospital. And if they die, the gay partner can't inherit. Here you are, you're married, you're gay, you're married to someone, he dies or she dies fighting for Israel, and you can't inherit. These things are not okay. So those are the kinds of things that I'm interested in, I'm fighting for. But also, they don't allow women to read from the Torah at the Western Wall. They don't let Reform Jews congregate in a minyan at the Western Wall. He said there's a lot of things that they're trying to persecute Reform and conservative Jews for that I'm not okay with. And so for that reason, I put my name on this list. So let me show you the commercials. You could decide for yourself who you want to vote for.
Can you only vote for one person?
You can only vote for the organization. Let me see if I can. But you can vote multiple times, like with different names. So you can vote like for everyone who lives in your household. You have to be 18 years old, you have to pay $5 to vote, and you have to be Jewish. You have to self-identify as a Jew. But like I can vote, I mean, my daughter can vote. I could try to influence her vote, I think I don't know why I can't find it. Let's see. All right. I'm having trouble finding the right. Well, let me show you the Orthodox one first. It's in Hebrew, but it has subtitles. Actually, no, I think it's in English. Is it playing? Yeah, this guy.
Do you care about Eretz Yisrael? Of course you do. You have
Can you hear it?
visited dozens of times. You daven for Eretz Yisrael every day. You may have learned in yeshiva here. You may have children who learn in yeshiva here right now. You may even live here. Perhaps you get stuck here in Eretz Yisrael. You may even own an apartment here. If you really care, you know that there's a small group of Jews living outside of
That's us.
And I'm not talking about Torah Jews like you and me.
We're the non-Torah Jews.
Control over many critical issues here in Eretz Yisrael that impact Klal Yisrael every single day. This is something that most pro-Jews don't know about, but really need to hear. This small group has a major influence in what happens in Israel. Who can convert to Yiddishkeit, public transportation on Shabbos, kashrut standards in Eretz Yisrael, yeshiva bachim serving in the army, and even kosher cell phones, and much, much more. You are invested and involved in Eretz Yisrael, but you are powerless in the biggest decisions that affect you, all because of a small group of Jews in America that has too much power. Will you just stand by and let that happen? Are you ready to change that? Before the state of Israel was established,
That's the building I was talking about.
was created in
Where?
order to focus on the creation of a Jewish state. When the state of Israel came into being in 1948, the WCO transitioned into an extremely powerful entity that represents world Jewry's position on key issues. The WCO consists of major Israeli organizations and agencies like the Kakao, the Jewish National Fund, which buys and develops the land of Israel, and the Jewish Agency, which oversees Aliyah activities. Today, the JNF is not just about planting trees in Israel. The Jewish Agency is no longer just about bringing Jews and encouraging them to make Aliyah. Today, these major Israeli organizations have been pushing a hidden agenda that gets imposed on Israeli society every single day.
Like supporting reform institutions.
Strategies and budgets are all controlled by the World Zionist Congress. It's time to stop letting major decisions about Eretz Yisrael be determined by people who oppose Torah values, people who don't appreciate or honor the Kedusha of our land. Every 5 years, the World Zionist Congress holds an open election to choose around 500 people to represent world Jewry, which infects every aspect of Israeli society. Over the past 30 years, the WCO has been taken over by left-wing groups who have ignored the cries of the Torah world to stop the harmful policies against our values, communities, and Mekaymes HaKadoshim. Finally, in 2020, under the guidance of our Gedolim, a small group championing Torah values and the Kedusha of Eretz Yisrael mobilized major American frum communities and garnered enough votes to secure a significant role towards accurately representing diaspora Jewry in the World Zionist Congress. Now we are not silenced anymore, but we still have a long way to go. The World Zionist Congress continues to control powerful entities and to influence major decisions in Israel, and they claim to represent the continue to let them be your voice, or do you want your representatives to reflect your Torah values, priorities, and interests? Up to you.
Okay, very charming guy. But he wants Orthodox law to be the law of the land. And that's what this election is all about. So let me just show you, we'll end with this, but I'll show you the Reform commercial. Okay, here's the Reform one. Reform and conservative.
In the past year, we've seen more than ever that what happens in Israel impacts Jews across the globe.
He's the president of the Reform movement.
You have the power to help shape the future of Israel by joining our campaign and voting in the 2025 World Zionist Congress elections.
The World Zionist Congress is a democratically elected international body that convenes every 5 years and the one chance for diaspora Jews like you to have a voice and a vote in Israel.
The World Zionist Congress controls billions in funding and makes policy that affects Jews in Israel and across the world.
The election is a way for you to support democracy, pluralism, security, and a path to peace in Israel, to stand up for women's and LGBTQ+ rights, and against future settlement expansion in the West Bank.
If we don't vote and we don't show up, we know who will. Our extremist, ultra-Orthodox opponents stand against these values, have fought us at every turn, and are mobilizing to roll back any progress we've made. It will take all of us to stop them.
We need Israel to reflect our Reformed Jewish values, where your children and grandchildren will be safe and welcome.
Reformed Jewish members in the Congress help promote our values on issues that affect all of us in the Jewish community.
The election is March 10th through May 4th, 2025.
U.S. citizens or permanent residents who are Jewish and at least 18 years old can vote for the Reform slate online or by paper ballot.
There's a $5 charge to cover the cost of the election, but you can turn your $5 into $5 billion of funding support for our values in Israel.
We're building a movement across the country to get our family, friends, and neighbors out to vote in this crucial election. We need your help. Please join us.
So we're going to be actually sending out an email with it's not open yet. It doesn't start till March 10th, and you can go on and vote and send it to whoever you want, and you can vote for whoever you want. I mean, what they should have done in this commercial was they should have said, compared to all the other groups running, our number 50 guy is way better than a lot of the other. Some of the other 50 ranked guys on the other platforms are horrible. But I think they missed an opportunity there. But anyway, that's the story. So hopefully now you have a little bit of a better sense of what's going on in Israel with the movements. Yeah, well, it depends where you stand. But for me, that's why I'm with them. So, all right. Well, thank you.